My name is George Webb, like Mark said, and I did not want to become a journalist at all. My brother was doing that when he was in high school, interviewing people like George Bush and so forth. I was a basketball player. You might have gotten that from my height. And I went into high tech. I was really excited about high tech. And I did that for 35 years in Silicon Valley. And believe me, you make a lot more money in high tech than you do in journalism. Journalism is a vow of poverty. But, as Dave Pettinger knows and as Casey Wayland knows, but it is the most satisfying thing you can do with your life because you really are affecting people outside of yourself. You're not just worried about your own house and your own family, etc., but you're worrying about the bigger picture, which is really important. And so what I tried to do when I came over and got out of high tech, I took what cash I had made and I put it into something called citizen journalism, which is what I'm doing, what you see me doing here. There's nobody sponsoring me. I'm flying down there on my own dime. I'm going to the place where the fire breaks out. I'm photographing how the fire engines are not fighting the fire. I'm showing how everyone's just kind of creating a controlled burn area. And that's citizen journalism, because the story that came out because of citizen journalism of this fire flew directly in the face of the false narrative that was being pushed by CNN and all the other mainstream media. Basically, the story was going to be, and before I go into the fire, I just want to back up a second and say, I had a very good friend who lived here. Some of the citizen journalists, I'm not just a citizen journalist, I have led a group over the last 8 years where we've met about 45 different times for about a week to 2 weeks in a very much a situation like this where we're meeting eye to eye and we're doing deep dives on stories. So whether it's the murder of the AI whistleblower that Ian Carroll talks about, right? We go there and actually film the actual death scene and so forth, and we have everyone do all the research. Some of the citizen journalists are here with me tonight. They came from Washington and they came from Oregon, drove a long way to be here. But this is what they do. They go in, they also have the interest of getting the truth out to the people. And they're doing some people bring an engineering background, some people bring a research background, but through a collective effort, we get the truth out to the people around the world. And it's much more powerful than you might think. It's much more powerful of a model, citizen journalism, especially when we work together and don't try to undermine each other. When we work together, it's a much more powerful model to getting the truth out. And you might be surprised by that. You might think, well, CNN's so big and New York Times is so big and so forth. But actually each one of those individual reporters is looking for his own scoop, and he might only have one, or she might only have one or two people that are doing research. And they're all in a competitive nature, so they're not sharing, right? Because each person wants the scoop. Citizen journalists don't have any of that problem. We don't have a problem of, we have to get this story out because we need to keep our job or please our boss. We just want the story to get out so the truth gets out to the American people and the people all around the world. And oh, by the way, I got to get my plug in here really quick. There's all the shirts. I saw the shirts at Old State Saloon, and this is my favorite one. Of course, the American flag, right? But on the back, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's heterosexual month here. It's heterosexual month here for all those in favor of heterosexuality. And I got Mark off to the side and I said, I got the shirt. I just want to make sure I can wear it next month too. He goes, oh, no, every month here is heterosexual month. I said, damn, I love this place. I love the fact you can have the Bible study, at the bar too. So that's pretty cool. The Good Time Charlie guy who plays the guitar and everything, that's pretty cool. So there's a lot of events. But my point on citizen journalism, it's people like you, right, that decide that they want to step up. Some people only can give a few minutes a day. They can only be online. We have a lot of people that are not ambulatory. We have folks in Cleveland, all over the country, all over the world, that the only way they can contribute is through their research online. Other people come and meet with us. So sometimes I'm a lone wolf and I'm not there by myself, but the particular human interest story here in Pacific Palisades where the fire was was one of the people in Hollywood, which you normally don't find, was of a like mind in citizen journalism, where he had a lot of experience working with big companies, Sony. He started with Fox. He got Fox Online. He had a lot of Virgin Records, Sega Genesis, worked for Spielberg. Normally, you don't get anybody's time like that, but this guy was an expert in creative consulting and how to help people who are not journalists get their story out, to synthesize their story so it's impactful, it's true, it's verified, it's validated, it has the citations and so forth, and it's news. It's not just some made-up false narrative of the MSM. So it's that hill that you see behind me here, where we had a lot of our meetings. Some of the people are here with me, citizen journalists, where we actually met up on that hill, beautiful bluff in Pacific Palisades. Now, he lived in a rent-controlled 8-unit apartment that he paid $2,000 a month. That was about 600 square feet. So he's not one of the millionaires. But this neighborhood in Pacific Palisades, if you don't know the story, was a neighborhood that had been around since 1920. Originally was a place for religious pilgrimage. You may remember you saw the movie Chinatown maybe, or maybe you saw the movie Grapes of Wrath, and you saw all these Okies for people from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl where they lost everything, right? And so what did they do? The only thing they had was their jalopies, right? And so they got in their jalopies and they headed to California. If you've seen the movie Grapes of Wrath, they do a pretty good job of telling the story. And those people ended up in the orange groves and the apple groves picking fruit up in the upper valley there, San Fernando Valley. And on weekends, on Sundays, what they used to do is drive to the end of Pacific Palisades and pray. And they would have revivals there, looking out over the ocean, because it was inspiring. It was a awesome experience, right? That was their one time when they got to see the ocean. And then they were back in the fields to pick their oranges or apples. And if you've read Steinbeck, it's a little bit more involved, but the Grapes of Wrath with Steinbeck really goes into the daily life of those people. This neighborhood really was directly descendant of those folks. And the street names actually in Pacific Palisades are named after women's colleges. They're named after women's religious colleges. So Peter, my good friend, lived on Swarthmore, you know, it's a famous women's college. And then the streets started A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They were all named after women's colleges. So this was a place of religious pilgrimage. It was also a very working class neighborhood. Everyone thinks the fires were all, James Woods. James Woods does live in the neighborhood. And a very wealthy actor and so forth. Most of the houses were modest houses in the fire. Most of the houses had been handed down from grandfather to father to son, grandmother, granddaughter, etc. So this was a neighborhood in a very woke blue area, if you will, that was kind of red, or at least purple, which is unusual. It looks red to everybody else who lives around there. You know, Westwood's pretty woke, UCLA, and Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Adam Schiff, that's where he's based. Pretty blue to the south. Malibu, where all the movie stars are, pretty blue. This was the one place where there was a little bit of red. And you're going to find that the central thesis here is, just like Visine, you remember the commercial, it gets the red out. This fire got the red out. The place where the controlled burn really occurred, and I know I'm going to prove this to you, was really in this one enclave. I'm going to prove it several different ways, but you already saw in the first piece that was from India Today, that little 2-minute clip that ended kind of abruptly. It's probably because I edited it, Mark. I'm not as good as you guys here at Old State Saloon. But that clip was the thing that changed the narrative. That clip from India Today, now you might not think India Today, I don't watch India Today. But India Today and then also CNN India are groups that we work with when we get a story, which is, oh, wait a minute, what really caused the fire? Was it because there wasn't enough firefighters because they cut the fire budget? Or was it because of this 117-gallon reservoir, million gallon, excuse me, thank you, Dave. 117 million gallon reservoir was left empty, and there was only 3 1 million gallon reservoirs left. What's the true story, right? And the true story was by on-the-ground reporting, getting there, getting that piece done with India Today, right? And we got that out the first day because Peter lived there. Peter's house, the friend I was telling you about who was hosting these citizen journalists, his house was completely burned down. His daughter, who lived by the reservoir, and his mother, his ex-wife, who ran the neighborhood association, her house completely burned down. And his brother's house also burned down. All 3 houses burned down. So there was 2 vying scenarios, vying narratives. One was LA fire, sort of like 9/11, NYPD, NYFD. This is going to be LAFD. We need more money. We've had this big burn. Now we need a Marshall Fund. You know, Gavin Newsom wants a Marshall Fund and all this money to come in, federal money to come in, right? Or was it incredible mismanagement? Or was it almost deliberately accident waiting to happen, right? And see, these are the 2 narratives. How do you beat MSM? How do you beat MSM? Because they've got a huge platform, huge audiences. Ever since Ted Turner started CNN, he's got a lock on the market, as far as online news. ABC, NBC go all the way back to the early days of radio. How do you beat them? Well, you beat them by being first out. First of all, you have to be there, right? Second of all, you have to be the first out with a story, which we were with Peter. And third, you got to call a friend. You got to phone a friend because you ain't going to do it by yourself because nobody's going to know who you are. I mean, Ian Carroll, who's not quite as tall as me, but shockingly good looking and beautiful hair, and he can pack a room too. But I mean, Ian Carroll only has 1 million Twitter followers. Even the great Ian Carroll only has 1 million TikTok followers. That's huge in terms of social media, but not that big in terms of the CNN numbers and so forth. So I'm probably, am I doing okay? All right, I'm good. So the thing is, we had to pick a partner that wasn't jaded, that wasn't going to knock down our story, that wasn't going to, that wasn't going to say, well, this is conspiracy theory that they left the 117 million gallon reservoir empty. So we got that story to India Today. I arranged the story. It's 1.2 billion people, I think, maybe more. English speaking, even more important. Democracy, pretty darn important. Those things all together. And we were able to get that story out. And that story that you saw that played at the beginning here played on India Today. Well, that caused a whole bunch of things to happen, which is this is an area here of Pacific Palisades, just to give you an idea of the new part of Pacific Palisades. This is the area of Rick Caruso, who had his own fire trucks or his own water trucks and was able to save everything. You see, nothing is burned. He also ran, he used to have a car dealerships in Los Angeles. He also ran against Karen Bass, right? And so he's probably going to win the next time around. But the point here is, if you have water, the thing we were trying to establish, if you have water, it wouldn't have burned, right? Then everybody said, well, yeah, rocket science, water stops fire, Now wait, let's see, there was a guy named Nero who fiddled because he wanted to do renovation, remember? And then there was the fire of 1666 in London, remember that one? Remember Napoleon had an ambition with his opera house that he ended up burning a lot of. So fire has been used as a mover of people before. But this proved unequivocally that if you had your water, you wouldn't lose your house, right? Well, people said, oh, it's not realistic because the 3 million gallons would have gone quickly. We had that story go out on India Today. LA Times, by the time the clock came around from India to London and then to LA, the LA Times was out with the empty reservoir story the next day. When that hit, and this is, a pretty well-read paper inside Los Angeles, it was the cat that you couldn't put back in the bag. If it would have just been India Today, probably wouldn't know about the empty reservoir today. But because LA Times picked it up, because India Today was scooping them, again, playing at their competitive and their ego rather than their desire for truth, but, that's the hardball that you have to play, right? So LA Times came out with a story, then the awkward interview. The awkward interview with Gavin Newsom, where the guy says, well, what about the empty reservoir? And Gavin Newsom is the, croak moment. He's just like, how did you, and we're going to look into that. 117 million gallons, right, is like if I had 117 milk jars, those waters that you get at Costco or whatever, versus 3. They had 1 million gallons versus 117 million gallons, right? Now, I'll go into how this reservoir could have easily been filled. But you already can see this disaster was predictable. The reservoir is empty since February, as you saw in the piece, right? It was predictable, and they could have filled it. And it was a red flag conditions, which meant fire conditions. Trump then, this is how this kind of story is progressing. Trump comes out, getting ready to take office, and says, hey, by the way, now that Trump knows it's water, and now that Trump knows the reservoir is empty, he said, I had a deal for Gavin Newsom. I offered him all the water he could use, right? In 2020. It's through the Department of Commerce. And then Trump got very specific. This was a C-SPAN interview that he did at Mar-a-Lago. And everyone was like, oh, Trump told you so, you dumbass. This is where we really got Gavin Newsom. It's like, Trump told you so. And he did this again and again, by the way. There were several different places where Trump said, you need to fill the damn reservoir, right? So how are you going to blame this one on me when I take office? How are you going to blame this one on anybody but you and your mismanagement? So that was helpful. This is probably day 3 now into the story cycle. So I'll just go into what I did to try to basically hammer down the story. I basically went to every place along the way on the perimeter where the controlled burn line was, and I showed that there was no firefighting going on. I showed that it was a police action, and it was more of a coordinating operation to make sure that citizens couldn't go in and see what was happening to their houses. And I guess there's the only way to show you is actually to show you the video. I will do that. Okay, George Webb here at San Vicente and Ocean. This is the last high-rise sort of on Ocean. You've got the Santa Monica police diverting traffic here. So no farther, you can't go any farther on Ocean than San Vicente. And of course, they don't want you to be out at all. But it's very smoky here, hard to breathe and irritating on the eyes. So definitely get a mask. You may want some kind of eye protection if you have to come this way, but the police say don't come if you can avoid it. Okay, so that was very early in the morning. I had spent the previous night in a fire shelter with, in Westwood with a whole bunch of folks that were. I gave my hotel room to Peter Duke, who had been burned out of his house. To he and his wife. They needed it more than I needed my hotel room. But I was in the Red Cross shelter, and you wouldn't believe the number of interviews you can get in a Red Cross shelter in 8 hours. Nobody has anything to do other than give you interview after interview. And I met a lot of millionaires sleeping right next on Army cots sleeping right next to homeless people that night. But that's why I got up so early, because I didn't want to spend any more time on the Army cot, and that's why I was up at 6 going up and looking at the cordoning process. I had also interviewed a CAL FIRE officer before this, and he said, I said, I heard there was no air resources. He goes, yep, no air resources. Why? Because Biden was there. And Biden, Air Force One had grounded all the air assets. So that's like taking out the other prong, right, of being able to put the fire out with the helicopters or the planes, the fixed wing planes. So I don't know how else to do this other than gumshoe and just going there. Okay, hello everyone, George Webb here at the PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway. This is Will Rogers State Park, not to be confused with the beach park, not to be confused with Will Rogers' old homestead. But I played volleyball here many times on this beach. Met St. John Smith here, is a very nice man. But right now, as you can see, the traffic is still going up PCH. But the fire department here, Santa Monica, Los Angeles Fire Department, excuse me, is using Will Rogers State Beach Park as sort of a staging area. It looks like you can get through, and I'm going to see how far we can get to assess the damage. I saw some people comparing notes of some very well-known things in Pacific Palisades up on top of the hill. I don't want to spread any rumors, so I'm going to go see it for myself to see if it's true. But here we are. It's the Chevron, the well-known Chevron. And I had seen some pictures by residents that showed the devastation of everything burned. And I just didn't want to say it on the open air until I saw it for myself. And I was going up here on Channel Boulevard to go see it for myself and take pictures for myself. And this is where you'll see the police stop me. And at the corner of Channel and PCH, and the officers are saying no more. These two gentlemen wanted to go up. They couldn't go up. You can't go up the hill. That gentleman asked. They're roping it off right now. The watch commander there just spoke to him directly. They're roping it off right now. You can't get any farther. They don't want anybody coming up PCH this way. They're telling everybody to go back that way on Channel. This is as far as you get if you're a walker, a biker, anywhere. This is as far as you get right now. They're roping this off right. So that is when I started getting the feeling that, wait a minute, I don't see any fire assets moving. I don't see any anybody going up to stop this. At this point, I had inclination that there was a vast burn, but I had no inclination that it really was the water yet, until my associate, Peter, went back to try to find his house. He had a press pass, and he came in the other way, and he was able to get to his house, and he was able to interview this guy. Now the truth of the situation is getting out, because this guy is a 65-year-old guy with only a garden hose in the middle of this towering inferno, or this torrential inferno, was able to save his house in entirety with only a garden hose. And he testified, and he told Peter that he never saw one fire asset, never saw one fire truck in the whole time he was there. And he defended his home from the fire. This is when the narrative starts falling apart, that there wasn't enough money for fire and all these other, LA Fire. You see the football now, they have all wearing LAFD, and they're fighting the fire really hard. This is not true. This guy defended his home, and and everything around him. He lived directly across the street from Peter. Everything around him devastated. So I get a little bit closer here, and I'll just play. Okay, I've got a little bit closer here up PCH from the lifeguard. The lifeguard station is 15100. So I worked my way around the canyon. Those logs up there, those split rail logs, I believe is where we held most of our charrettes, right there. And you can see there's still black smoke billowing. There's still black smoke billowing down Swarthmore. Right at the end of this, you can see here there's still little wisps of embers that are catching fire. So my point here is there, you saw the cars racing away from the fire. I'm going toward the fire. I'm not a firefighter. I don't have any, you can see my eyes are burning and I'm choking from all the smoke, but I'm not a firefighter. I'm going toward the smoke and nothing special about that. There's other people doing the same, but the police are racing away from it, right? The firemen are not going toward it. And this again is what I think is narrative. Well, George Webb, sort of with the epilogue here, the fire's still going, and you see the police officers here at the command center, as well as fire, and now you have the lifeguards here as well. Police have set up their command post there, and then of course the fire command set up there. It's very sad. It's 9:30 in the morning, and it looks like it's, I don't know, about 6 o'clock at night for a cloudy sunset. So it's a very eerie feeling with this whole hillside just completely ravaged and scorched. So when Peter got back to his house, this is what he saw. Complete devastation. And again, the guy with the garden hose directly across the street. So we thought, oh, it might be just an outlier. It might just be one of those crazy wind patterns that just didn't hit this one person's house, and he was lucky to have his life with the garden hose. That turned out not to be true. It turned out to be anybody who stayed with a garden hose saved their house. Anybody who stayed with a garden hose. So we had a couple of 85-year-old couple with 2 garden hoses saved their house, massive house. We had a guy with a garden hose save his whole apartment complex. I thought I had the pictures in here, but I must have skipped it. But here's Peter and I in better times on that same hillside. And it's an odd, ironic twist of fate that we would have done so much in learning about citizen journalism and about getting to the story first and beating the false narratives, that it would be his house that we were covering the story. So sometimes ironic twists of fate end up, there's a silver lining in all this. And I believe Peter may go live on a boat, and he might start exploring the world with his wife on a boat, as these things happen, people go through these personal transitions. But I'll just play a little bit, just to give you a flavor of who Peter is. Okay, hello everyone. Here in Pacific Palisades with the great Peter Duke, and he just amazed us again with all of his knowledge of AI and how AI is being used and with tools. Peter, a tour de force presentation today.
Well, gee whiz, thanks, George. I'm still learning all this AI stuff, and it's thanks to supporters of this channel, of your channel, and the people that follow us that I know as much as I do.
And so that's the point here. I saw you're going to have an AI presentation in March. AI is a very powerful tool that can be used for the good. It's not just a woke engine to tell fake stories. It can be used for truth. Hopefully Elon Musk will win that battle, and I'm a part of that battle every day. But I just wanted to go through a couple of the folks. These folks saved their house with a garden hose. This is the 85-year-old couple that saved their house with 2 garden hoses. Huge house that been in the family through 3 generations. This is this other gentleman who had right across from Peter's house that saved his house, nothing touched. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have a exciting time. I'm not just, they weren't just doing this. I mean, they were out, but still they saved everything. And if those fire assets that were down with me would have been up there, what would have happened? So there he is with his hose. This guy is the guy who saved his whole apartment complex, huge apartment complex, right? That this one guy saved with, they're using swimming pool water, by the way. There was no water pressure in the fire engines, in the fire hydrants. And some of the people in this picture are here tonight. Peter, we talked about this. we had talked about the fire and the canyon and so forth. And we had two different meetings, charrettes, we call them, news gathering meetings of 10 to 12 people with like interests before the fires. And we had talked about sort of this woke kind of institute, sort of World Economic Forum West. This is sort of WEF West, which is called the Berggruen Institute. My old boss at Sun Microsystems, Eric Schmidt, is a part of it. But this Berggruen guy is right out of Central Casting as far as Kissinger, mini Kissinger, is the only way you can call him. And he says things like, fire is a nature's way of cleansing. Fire is because of this hillside shouldn't have been developed. It should be just nature, and also my multi-million-dollar center, which has modern fireproofing, like the Getty. And he lives up by the Getty. He lives in the old mansions in Beverly Hills, and it's easy to make these proclamations about somebody else's working class home when you do that. But he's sort of our common man Spielberg, giving of his time when we took people to Los Angeles, and we covered this topic at length about how fire could be used as a form of ethnic cleansing. And it really did happen. So intent is awfully hard to prove. Negligence and gross negligence in this case is extremely easy to prove. So I'll leave it for you to decide what the folks of Los Angeles decided to do.
It looks like the production.
But Peter did a lot of movies and so forth, so he's actually taking us. This is the old Will Rogers ranch.
Well, we are production.
And then I'm here at Peter's house. And again, these kind of ironic twists are all through this story. Peter used to have a barbecue in the back of, where we're looking in the back of his house, his apartment. And he used to take a picture every night, and he said, if Americans are barbecuing, that's your sure sign that there's no revolution tonight. So he would always show a picture of his steak cooking and going, well, no revolution tonight, obviously, because we're barbecuing. And it's very ironic that we made these films, because the only thing, he's giving me his car here, he's loaning me his car, and that's the only thing he has left. So I'll just play this. It'll be my last thing I play.
I'm giving George Webb my permission to drive my car to the store.
And you're Peter Duke.
And I'm Peter Duke.
And I'm George Webb, and that's the car.
There it is.
And you are an upstanding member of Pacific Palisades.
Indeed. PP, Pacific Palisades.
Oh, PP. Okay, there we go. So that gives you a little bit of the humor of Peter Duke. So that's my presentation, which is how common people like us can make a difference against elites and false narratives. And we do this every day. We knock down these false narratives every day. You may have seen on CNN the crying firemen, right? The firemen crying, and the firemen saying, if only they would have listened to us and given us more resources, right? CNN it's just theater. It's not true, right? They were all down there while Peter and I were heading up the other way, and that's just the facts of the case. Trump's going to be the aftermath of this is Gavin Newsom wants a huge Marshall Fund. You remember the Marshall Fund was used after World War II to rebuild the cities of Europe after the devastation of Allied bombing, right? He wants a huge slush fund, basically. They were talking about a Marshall Fund for after Ukraine, right? And so this is going to be another one of these slush funds that Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff can decide how to mete it out. What two things are coming, right? Well, there's 15-minute cities that the Berggruen Institute's pushing. You got the LA 2028 Olympics that's coming, right? And this whole idea of, hey, let's put in high density. We're already talking about removing the R1 red neighborhood, red houses, and making it R3 high density blue housing, right? So that's the hidden agenda here. So is this Nero's fire? Is this or I guess it was James I that had the fire of 1666, these cleansing fires, these ethnic cleansing fires? I'll leave it for you to judge, but The empty reservoir is the takeaway and the truth. And we beat them all. We beat all the false narratives. We beat all the big networks with the truth. And the truth is just a tiger. You just need to let it out and it'll find its own way. That's the one thing I've learned here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. What was your favorite memory or the thing you're most proud of as far as being an investigative reporter?
Well, the fun part about being an investigative reporter, remember, everybody here can do this anytime you want with your phone, is the last thing I did. We had this whistleblower who you might have heard about, that Ian Carroll has talked about quite a bit, who was murdered in his apartment. It's a very huge case. It's the New York Times is suing OpenAI. You got Grok. You got 4 billionaires in this story. You got Elon Musk with AI, with Grok. You got Sam Altman with OpenAI, which is the leader. You've got Meta, which is Mark Zuckerberg, and you also have Jeff Bezos with Anthropic. So you've got these 4 guys all competing. They're all suing OpenAI because they're the leader. And now this kid who's in charge of training these systems to make them so good, to make it OpenAI the leader, right, is all of a sudden found dead. And his parents say he's murdered. And it's her word as a grieving mother versus the Office of Coroner and Medical Examiner who say it's a suicide. So what does a journalist do? Hey, get me into the apartment. Let me film it. Let me film it and socialize it and show it to people like India Today and CNN. Tucker Carlson just recently aired my footage. And all of a sudden people go, wait a minute, the kid supposedly shot himself like this. He missed his own brain. He is blood over here with hair and blood in the sink. Then he's sitting, and then he's shot here, and then he's crawling through 3 piles of blood. And oh, by the way, there's a huge tuft of hair, a bloody tuft of hair underneath the door. Doors don't grow hair, and they don't grow bloody hair, do they? That's not a suicide, right? Especially when the bullet did not go all the way through. It lodged between his C1 and C2 process, right? It might have paralyzed him, but it certainly wouldn't cause an exit wound and the hair to come off. So it's obviously, and Tucker Carlson said this in the interview with the mother, about a month after we did the original interview with the mother. And again, this is where I'm saying you sort of climb the ladder with social influence here. You get the story out there, get it to India Today, get it to CNN, and then a Tucker Carlson comes in and picks up the interview. We also worked with Mario Nafal, if you know Mario, and he has a big social media footprint. We also got it to Elon Musk. Elon Musk retweeted it 4 times now. Elon Musk has retweeted this. So that's 250 million people, or 210 million people, excuse me, that follow Elon Musk. So I had to learn this the hard way, which is you can have the great story, but it's like a tree falling in the forest and nobody hearing, right? And I had to learn to put just as much effort into getting that story up the ladder to the people who could make a social imprint, make a social footprint, as I did with the original fact finding and the fact getting. So the reason why I'm most proudest of my last story is because I'm getting better and learning how to do this better and better. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. So just earlier today, President Trump announced that he had pardoned Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road. Do you know much about that, and any thoughts?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. I think Ross Ulbricht, this is sort of one of these things the FBI does where they encourage a young, aspiring person who's building websites. If you remember, Silk Road was a website. And unfortunately, they got into selling things that are illegal, right? And then they use it as sort of a catchment basin or a honey trap for a whole bunch of people. And then when they're done using the person for the entrapment or the sting operation, basically, then they arrest the kid who did the sting operation. And so I agree with Donald Trump. If you go to the entrepreneur who created Silk Road and you say, we're going to use you as an informant and you're going to perform this action, that's okay. But to undermine him and let him go, right, and then use him and then put him in jail, I think it's wrong. And so I'm very much in favor of the president giving him a pardon.
I'll bring it right over to you, sir. But in the meantime, I have a question. As a former photojournalist, I've had to hide in bushes and even trash cans to get pictures. How often do you have to skirt the lines to get behind the scenes in today's world? How do you minimize risk?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, God made me 6'8". So I don't hide behind anything. I mean, fire truck, maybe, but I don't hide behind many things. And I use the size to try to use it to my advantage. I mean, I can go up to a scene where there's hundreds of reporters. I remember this is the Jeff Epstein case, and get the best shot, right? Just lean over everybody and get the best angle, best shot. So I don't, and you know, you may have mentioned this earlier about, you know, how do you minimize risk and so forth. If you're working for the big guy, that one, the really important one, if it's your last day, it's your last day, and then you go to God. You know, that's the way I look at it. I don't have fear because I know, as you said, I know who my Lord and Savior is, and I know where I'm going when this is over. So I just don't have that kind of fear. I just don't.
My question is about the politicians. Down there, it said they couldn't get air resources into the area because of high winds. What has your investigation found out?
Well, I was there, and there was high winds that night. There was 70 mile an hour gusting to 100 mile an hour winds. So that there's no question that it would have been very difficult. But you saw Rick Caruso and the Caruso Village completely saved, right? Because they had the water there. And I think if they had just sprayed with ground resources, I'm not even saying they had to have air resources up, but the next day when you saw me go up there, they could have had air resources and they didn't. Joe Biden was at the Santa Monica fire station talking about his grandson, his great grandson being born. And I thought that was a little bit socially daft when people are losing all their houses. And he had a perfect opportunity. And I kept saying, I expect the president because it was the perfect opportunity for the president to go up there at that time, Joe Biden.
All right. Next one is the topic of direct energy weapons. All right. Did you notice any blue anything that wasn't burned? Did you notice melted metal parts on cars and yet next to live trees that weren't burned or right next to buildings that were? Anything unusual like that would indicate direct energy weapon involvement?
You know, I've seen a lot of the direct energy, the Lahaina stuff, I think is the one that everybody refers to, and the blue roofs and so forth. I didn't see any evidence of that. I didn't see any blue arcing in the sky or anything like that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. If you look at people say that like that's a conspiracy theory. I used to live near Dahlgren Navy Warfare Center, Surface Warfare Center on the Potomac, and they tested direct energy weapons all the time. So it's like if you think it's a conspiracy theory, you might want to go talk to the guys at Dahlgren because they certainly are working every day on these things. So I'm not ruling it out, but I just didn't see any evidence of it.
All right. I think the next question is more like in general, not related to necessarily this topic, but how much do you believe the woke policies are weaponized intentional incompetence versus severe general government mismanagement?
In this case, I think it's about 90% deliberate because they knew fire. It was red flag conditions, right? They had a fire at this San Ynez Reservoir on November the 8th. The helicopter news guy said, hey, they got to fill that reservoir. They had another fire on the 15th of November. They had another fire on the 1st of January. All along the way, people said they need to fill the reservoir. So what is that? I mean, that's taking gross negligence all the way to the edge of intent, right? It's hard to prove that somebody is that dumb, right? I mean, you can use that for excuse for so long, but this one really pushes it.
There were reports of criminals swarming evacuated areas and looting abandoned houses. Did you see any of this kind of activity? Did anybody who stayed behind use the Second Amendment to defend their property?
That happened at some of the other fires, but I didn't report on that personally. But I did see this is the most unbelievable story. A felon bought a fire truck and was in Pacific Palisades impersonating a fireman with another guy. Why are you there as a felon with a fire truck and you're not fighting the fire? Unless you're giving the impression that you're fighting the fire, and therefore you're there as sort of a prop, So just very odd. I'll just leave it at that. No, I didn't see any evidence of looting, but I heard of other stories. I think out by the Altadena fire, I heard a story there, and looting in other places. The problem with Pacific Palisades, there's nothing to loot. Everything was burned to a crisp.
Someone else already asked the question. I'm over here. Already asked the question about. I was going to ask the question about directed energy and geoengineering. First, I want to say, I lived in the Palisades for 24 years. It was my home. It was my community. I moved here 3 months ago, and so I had lots of boots on the ground conversations with people while this was happening. There's no part of me that believes that this was not intentional. Government mismanagement sparked by deliberate land grabbing going on. And what I cannot fathom is how, because what I kept hearing from people was the way it was like fires just popping up out of nowhere. Pacific Palisades is on the west side. The Eaton fire was on the east side of LA. And then they were just popping up. I saw some interviews, citizen journalism, where people were saying one guy saw a fire just pop up out of nowhere. And so there's a part of me that thinks that, but I have a question for you specifically. Do you remember the images that they were showing of the abandoned cars on Palisades Drive? Okay, that's where I lived, up in the Highlands. And so remember during COVID, where they were showing like all the coffins and trying to make us believe people were dying, and it came out that it was like a scene from a film. I have not been able to corroborate with anyone. I know that area really well, and all those abandoned Mercedes, that was a very affluent area. I cannot understand how people could have driven down the hill and then left their cars there. Do you know anything about that particular incident? Because that does not make any sense to me.
So you lived up Temescal Canyon?
No, this was Palisades Drive, was an area called the Highlands.
Okay, yeah, Palisades Drive, at the top of Palisades Drive
That's where I lived.
San Ynez Reservoir, and that's where Peter's brother lived, and also where his daughter lived with his ex-wife. So I know exactly where you're talking about. At the very end of it is the reservoir, and that the fire was started just below that in Palisades. Now it somehow jumped. It came down the hill and somehow jumped over Rick Caruso's development. How does that happen? So, and in the sporadic nature, not the wildfire pattern that you normally have, but the spotting fires like you're talking about also are very suspect. It's almost like a mass formation psychosis to be so overwhelming in news that you're like, it's everywhere, so I don't want to look at Palisades anymore, right?
Also, unheard of for us to have had Santa Ana winds in January. They were always in November. That was the fire season in Los Angeles, was November. It was well known. That's when all the Santa Anas hit. So I don't know how they do it, but it was like ready to happen, and it was like they lit the match, and metaphorically and literally. It's just been heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking, and you're right. November is the time. I talked to a lot of people that were in U.S. Forest Service who were taken from areas like this to go to California in November, and it's well known for 100 years that was the high peak of fire. I was there. I did feel the winds. There were gusts, huge gusts. I don't know how it happens either, but there was the winds that night.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Have you heard, I've been hearing this, that BlackRock is coming around and wanting to buy up everything, and I want to know what you knew about that.
Well, I looked for that. I stayed for about a week. Again, I'm in a hotel now competing with 5,000 displaced people versus before it was just George Webb, and I shoelace budget versus people who are coming from wealth. So I had to leave at some point. I didn't see, other than the illusions that Gavin Newsom made about bringing investors in, I didn't see BlackRock or anybody going around. I did see There was anecdotal reports, but I can't confirm any of those at this point.
Regarding fire suppressants, I saw a story that officials in California, Newsom, and Insleek, Washington, had chosen not to maintain that aerial suppressant equipment as far as 3 years. Do you know anything about that?
Colson Aviation, I think, is the who had the contract, and I just don't think this was if you could stop it with a garden hose, what did they do before aviation? I mean, if you could stop it with a garden hose, that's what we needed, was pumper trucks. But I understand that there are a lot of investigative reporters following this Colson Aviation piece, but I wouldn't start there.
So I heard on the local news that they could not use regular helicopters. They needed to call in Black Hawk helicopters because the wind was blowing so hard. And when they tried dropping the water, the wind blew the water and it dissipated from the heat of the fires.
Yeah, and I agree with that because they couldn't get close enough. But the Navy helicopter pilot here would confirm that because these are military grade helicopters. But that still doesn't explain how Rick Caruso saved his whole Caruso village. Doesn't explain the 3 or 4 different people that saved their apartments and saved their houses with just a garden hose. To me, this is the untold story, which is a pumper truck could have saved Swarthmore. A pumper truck could have saved Villa de la Paz. Just a pumper truck, right? If we'd have taken all those resources and just coated everything with water from 117 million gallon, we wouldn't need any air at all. That's the bottom line here. Not even 117 million gallons. 20 million gallons would have done it.
And also one other thing they said that the fire hydrants were so low that there wasn't enough pressure to get the water up to the houses if there was water there.
The reason why there's no pressure in the fire hydrants and no water in the fire hydrants is because the reservoir was empty. The gravitational from the reservoir down to the fire hydrants is more than enough to power them. Yeah.
From John Camprith in Coeur d'Alene, he asks, what are a few important things that people who are not citizen journalists can do to discern the truth of events that unfold within our communities?
Well, you have a great citizen journalist, or not a citizen journalist, professional journalist in Coeur d'Alene. You've got the great Casey Whalen. So I would support local journalists like him. Yeah. Because it's the Casey Whalens that are the guys on the ground, that bring you the stories in Idaho. He's here I went over there with him to the Capitol and was filming all kinds of things. He's inside the Capitol. He's outside the Capitol. And he's carrying this huge, camera and the tripod. He gets the stories that people, for instance, I just followed Casey on a couple of stories. One was and what I'm saying here is follow your local reporters. He did the story on license plate readers for the Boise Capitol area and the police, for the Boise police doing license plate readers. Did you know that? Did you know? Some people consider it an invasion. Some people don't. The other one he did was a story up on the river up in a little bit further, and they were arguing over the school system and bond issues and these things. If you want to know what's going on in your community, you got to pick a guy like Casey Whalen and then follow him, and then retweet him. You don't even have to necessarily buy him a coffee. You can just retweet him, right? And that gets his footprint out there and gives us the good stuff.
Hey, George, you were able to change the police narrative on the death of the AI entrepreneur, Sushi. And could you explain how people here in Boise can do research and affect the possible change in the narrative on the case of Brian Koberger? Supposedly, there's an alternative narrative that the killings were a revenge killing by the Aryan Knights who were thrown in jail due to the confidential informant who was the mother of one of the girls that was killed. So how could the people in this area do research and determine whether that's a valid alternate narrative?
Yeah, I think so. I think these are the killings near University of Idaho, up in Moscow, and the guy. Yeah, a lot of these FBI sort of JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force, and they think, oh, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this drug cartel. So I got a great idea. I'll take these people that are with the Aryan Nation and get them into drug trafficking. And then we'll have the girl be the informant, and then we'll get all the guys that are drug trafficking because we can't get them on free speech because they're supposedly white supremacists. We'll get them on drug trafficking. That sounds like what's happening here, and which is kind of an underhanded way of kind of entrapping people. Now, if they were doing something with their belief system, Aryan Nation or something, and they weren't just doing Hitler salutes, but they were hurting someone and getting into somebody's, destroying property or violently hurting them, then they should go after him for that. But setting up this operation, this sting operation through this person and not being honest, that is the motive. It's a revenge motive is what I'm hearing you say. There's a revenge motive for the killings. It's not this random act of violence where this guy just decided to go into this college and kill all these young college students, right? You're saying that there's some other drug trafficking and revenge motive here, and that's disingenuous. That's just a lie. If that's true, that's just a lie. And people, there was another set of murders that Casey and Dave Pettinger was covering at the people who the devils told them to kill the people and all this sort of thing. If that turned out to be a government operation to bring in people who were buying drugs, that's disingenuous too. That's make crime. That's what I call make crime. And this goes all the way back to, I worked a case in Portland, Oregon, called the Portland Christmas Tree Bomber, where they had taken a Somalian kid who was well-adjusted, had great grades, great parents, but they got him at the local mosque praying one day. It's not far from where you live, Carol, down Hawthorne, a couple blocks away from where you live, and they started radicalizing him. His girlfriend was an FBI informant. His college roommate was an FBI informant. There was another good friend of his from Oregon State they started on him when he was 17. They worked on him for 3 years. When Portland wouldn't sign the JTTF agreement, when Sam Adams, the mayor, wouldn't, this is my red pill moment, if you will, where I started getting involved. They basically talked him into being a bomber. Right? They showed him pictures of U.S. Military personnel committing atrocities over a period of time. I don't know how they got those pictures, but then they convinced him one day to press the cell phone button that he thought was going to blow up the Portland Christmas tree lighting. And Sam Adams didn't know about it because he wasn't a part of JTTF. So they forced Portland, through embarrassing Sam Adams and removing him as mayor, they forced Portland into the surveillance state and the JTTF. And so I think this is where I've talked to Casey about this. This is where the government needs to be forthright and not run these covert operations and then chalk it up to something else that it isn't later on.
What is your favorite piece of information that the mainstream media does not want people to know about?
Boy, that's go any direction you want with that one. I think the number one thing, I think we already touched on it, is the dark hand. The dark hand in these operations that they set up to create these narratives, right? I want to, go back to Bruce Weaver, and he ended up being a CIA guy. They want to create a narrative that everyone, I lived in Washington, so I'm talking about Oregon Idaho from a distance. They want to say everybody in Idaho is gun-toting, white supremacist, Aryan Nation. That's not true. There's nobody that I've ever met that fits that description. But that's the narrative they want to create. Why? Because they want to say that we should be spending just as much money on domestic terrorism as we do on overseas terrorism. And so they go out and create the fake terrorism so that they can create a surveillance state and be in control. and be able to take out presidents. So that's the power they want. So they'll do any kind of lie that they need to. Bruce Weaver's probably the best example, Ruby Ridge and all the things that come after that. And this is just another one of those dominoes in their narrative building. It's totally fake. Thanks again to these great reporters here from Idaho, who, when I've looked into it, it's just the stories don't hold any water, right? It's just one big fake narrative.
Here's a question. Where do you get your information from with these facts you are saying?
The two eyes God gave me, the camera that Steve Jobs gave me, and the microphone. I think that's the number one, is when people say I've been accused of being a Mossad agent. I've been accused of being a Russian disinformation troll, probably already am in this broadcast, FBI agent. If that's true, why am I taking pictures of the AI whistleblower and just sending you the pictures? How am I adding my influence to the operation, right? And I would also like to get those checks. If there's any Mossad people that I'm on your payroll, please get those checks to me. They're not getting to me. Or we had two guys getting $400,000 a month. Benny, I can't remember his name. Johnson, $400,000 a month, and Tim Pool. And I'm like, $400 a month, please, make me an operative. No, I'm getting $0. So.
I'll follow up on an earlier question. Somebody says, I have a lot of research regarding the local corruption and trafficking, but I found out quickly it wasn't safe to share. So I would just say, hey, it's not safe to share for some people, depending on your life circumstances, and perhaps somebody else doesn't see that risk as much. So continue to ask around and see who is willing to share.
That's my old partner, task force, Jenny Moore. She used to say that all the time. If you see a trafficking situation, get it to me. I'll come forward. I don't care. And there are those folks that are just will do that. And God bless them.
What do you think 2025 will bring as far as the culture war? What are going to be the main issues of the culture war of 2025?
Well, I want to give a whoop whoop, a hoot hoot for our president, right? Woo hoo! I think Donald Trump has declared the culture war pretty. He not just promised, he delivered day one. The DEI thing, executive order. This is a great one. He's signing executive orders at the ball, at the inaugural ball. He's dancing with Melania. And she knocks everybody out with that dress, right? And then she comes over here and he goes, and here's the DEI, and here's the, hey, you got to go to work if you're a federal employee and not have 3 different businesses on the side. So I think the culture war is going to be defined by Donald Trump, and I think Donald Trump's going to win. So, and look at those in executive orders if you don't, and also the things that we've laid out as far as who the enemy is and the vigilance we need to have against these deep staters that want to use Ukraine or some other proxy to take down Trump. He listens to that. We made AI recommendations. You said you're going to do AI in March. He had Sam Altman today talking about the Starlink. Stargate is the $50 billion initiative in AI. $500 billion. Okay. See how citizen journalism works? Do I hear 600 billion? No, but here's where I think this is. Trump's first time was pretty good, but this time he's loaded for bear. He knows all the rats. He knows all the snakes in the grass. And he's also developed an acumen that he didn't have before as a real estate investor in other topics like AI. For instance, you might not know this, but AI relies on this NVIDIA graphics processor. It's called a GPU, 1,000 times faster than the regular CPU. It's only made in one place. There's other minor players, but it's made in Taiwan, right? Taiwan materials semiconductor, TMSC. Now that is where all of our AI future for warfare and everything else is, and it's 82 miles from China, the mainland China. And Xi has said that he is going to reunify this year. Now that's all of our chips. NVIDIA just does the plans, but the actual silicon foundry is in Taiwan. Now that's pretty good for day two. He's out of the chute with an infrastructure plan like we had with the CHIPS plan. You know, we have the huge Micron DRAM plant out here. And I went out there and said, we need 3 days ago, I went out there and said, we need a GPU thing just like this to bring this on shore. He's in the office, Oval Office today, 3 days later, announcing this initiative. So it's just an amazing, this whole presidency is light speed from the first one in terms of just making all the right moves.
I'm a longtime follower, and I had a question. If you could give a follow-up update, it's been a while, but the Awan spy ring story, I was curious, maybe it might be good to give a little summary, and then maybe how that might relate to the new Trump administration and, working on the deep state and maybe this dog program, or I'm not
Doge.
sure. Yeah, Doge program. I'm not sure how this is, if that's
Great.
been extracted
Sure.
out or.
No, that's a great question. I can tell you're a longtime follower, so thanks for following. So let's say you're John Brennan or Clapper or Hayden, or you're a part of a cabal that thinks that the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation. Trump just took away all their top secret clearances. The guy who did 9/11, Mike Morrell, took his clearance away too, right? But if you wanted to control Capitol Hill and you wanted to spy on all the senators and all the congressmen, right, so that you could blackmail them or undermine them or put leaks out to discredit them so that you could control what was going on Capitol Hill, you could do no better than having a spy ring on Capitol Hill and having devices where the folks who were using them thought that they were confidential. Meanwhile, you have a back door and you're seeing everything they're sending. And that's what the Awan spy ring was. Then they also used military-grade encryption to do things like Libya, do things like Syria, do things like Ukraine overthrow, the first CIA overthrow, and on and on and on. And they could use congressional slush funds for their own personal enrichment so they can pump and dump stocks. So that's what that 2017 story was about. I still think it's important today. It's not the BlackBerry anymore, but it is the same encryption technology. And it is the same people who will be using that technology to hack and so forth. We already saw Rhode Island being hacked. We saw the Change Healthcare with 100 million healthcare records stolen. We saw United Healthcare, their CEO, get gunned down in the street. This is the new future of AI, is the medical AI.
How do you feel about Trump cleaning up the country, getting immigrants out, and do you think it'll affect Idaho positively or negatively?
Well, okay. So I speak Spanish. Both of my kids are in healthcare, and they speak Spanish, and mainly to immigrant populations. So, and so I feel very strongly that we need to have compassion to the Hispanic speaking population. I know a lot of people who work in Boise who are outreach into mainly Spanish speaking, Hispanic speaking. I know that there are so many great Hispanic contributors, construction industry, all the industries, the hospitality, etc. Having said that, it is illegal, right? And they are here illegally. Now, the ones I'm worried about are the ones that are the ones that shot the deputy and killed the deputy, that Mark Trubel. I can't remember. He was running for sheriff. Trouble. Yeah, Doug Trouble. That he was talking about. Those are the ones that Trump needs to, I think, and Trump's doing this, focusing on them. That's a big enough problem right there. It's the ones that are the violent criminals that should be the focus. And then we'll worry about everybody else later. I just want to be honest. I was in Washington working on the DACA, which is these kids who really didn't have a say in coming to the United States. They've been here over 6 years. They speak just as perfect of an English as they do Spanish. They're the interpreters for their family. I didn't see any reason why those kids shouldn't be citizens because they had integrated. They'd integrated and they were going to pay taxes, etc. I think Trump still could revisit DACA. But I'll tell you what happened. I was working with the Schumer people, and Mark Short was the guy who was negotiating on the Trump side. And when they got to a deal, Trump got to the number that Schumer wanted. Schumer's people said, no deal. We just wanted to embarrass Trump. So 1.2 million, something like that was the final number. Didn't get their citizenship, not because of Donald Trump, Chuck Schumer, because of you. You were the person who denied those 1.2 million kids that could have had citizenship. So they talk out of both sides of their mouth. The Schumer people were the worst. I also dealt a lot with the Jamie Raskin people. They're the worst, right? And we need to have integrity again. It's not too much to ask. And immigration, they can't play this out of both sides of their mouth. They hide behind and they use these folks as human shields. Trump's numbers with Hispanic men were through the roof. And that shows that the lie isn't working. It's not traveling as well as it used to.
Are there any alternative media sources or so-called citizen journalists that you would caution us against? Things to look out for so as to not be misled?
When Ian Carroll cuts his hair, I start thinking, nah, what's he doing? No, Ian's awesome. I just try to promote the great ones. I love Ian. I love some of the stuff Mario does. I really love. James Lee is a new guy I'm following and really liking. I try not to do the throw the mud.
What do you think of the rumors of Elon and his Nazi Russian saluting thing at the Trump event inauguration?
If you take anything completely out of context, you are successful in taking something out of context. Well, here's what I saw. I owe my heart to you, right? That's what I saw.
We're going to use that, by the way, that movie.
Yeah. George Webb, Aryan Nation salute at Old State Saloon. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. Is he said, my heart goes out to you like this. And then they put a picture of 5 Democrats doing the same exact thing.
Right.
But that's not an Aryan salute, right? That's just Elon doing this. It's like the Trump thing, all these stylistics that mean nothing, right? They wouldn't let they put Roberts back in during the oath of office so that he wouldn't have his hand on the Bible, so that Trump wouldn't have that picture. But Melania had the Bible. She had another Bible right there for Trump. So Trump's getting really good at this underhandedness. They wanted the flag at half-mast for Jimmy Carter's death, right? One of Trump's executive orders was to put the flag at full mast for a new president. So Trump's getting pretty darn smart.
What do you think the biggest threat there is in America to Idaho?
The biggest threat to America or the biggest threat to Idaho? The biggest threat to, Micron was a customer of mine for a long time. Morris Knudsen and the great construction industries that are here, Simplot, the great agriculture. But I really believe this chip thing is the number one thing. The Micron folks should get into GPUs, and it will be a way of saving our country if Xi ever moved on TMSC. I think that's the biggest threat.
All right, our last question, which is a frequent question we asked here at the end, would be if you had the attention of everybody in the United States of America and they had to listen to you as you look straight in this camera right here, and you only had 1 minute, but everybody in America was going to listen to you, what would you tell them?
I would tell everyone in America to believe in your leadership and support your leadership. Your leadership, and specifically Donald Trump, might not do everything that you want out of the chute. He might not say something as strong as you want against vaccines and forced mandates and these sorts of things. But realize that he is fighting a two-front battle. He's fighting against our enemies of our country, our enemies within, but he's also being undermined at every step of the way by the news media and other people that are trying to knock him down and undermine him at every point along the way. So what I would say to you is allow Trump to make the decisions, that will answer the things that you're interested in. Bobby Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was there at the inaugural ball. He wasn't pushed out in terms of Make America Healthy Again, but I think he is coming to the fore. Ramaswamy sort of moving toward running for governor in Ohio. And now we'll see what Elon Musk is going to do with Doge. Keep the faith. If you didn't get everything that you wanted on day one for Christmas during the inauguration, just keep the faith is all I ask America tonight.
George, thank you so much for joining us here at Old State Saloon for this
Thank you.
presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Hope to have you back again in the future. Thank
All
you.
right.